Where's Blake? Is he still at Longhorn?
Is that where he went?
That's funny.
Wouldn't try to do it up fancy there in Florida and go to Red Lobster or something?
Outback.
Merry Christmas, everyone. This has been a tremendous year for Ryan and I with the growth of this podcast. We can't say thank you enough to our Patreon sponsors. So I decided that with as much talking of Henry McKenna that you're going to hear on this episode, it was worth doing a giveaway. I did the random drawing yesterday, and the winner is Chris Gatterdam. Congratulations, Chris. You're going to see a bottle of Henry McKenna show up on your doorstep next week. If you want to get on the next giveaway, make sure you support the show on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. Enjoy this episode, and we'll see you after the break, and Merry Christmas, everyone. Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. Kenny and Ryan here tonight, and we have the fourth edition of the Bourbon Community Roundtable. This is an interview where we have ourselves as well as a few different predominant bloggers that are in the arena and around the I guess you could say the space. And we just kind of talk about some of the things, but really the big one tonight is we really want to kind of look at a year in review of just kind of what happened in 2016. So before we kind of get into it and kind of start talking about really our first topic for the night, I want to go around the table and have everybody introduce themselves. So I'm going to send it over to Carrie. So Carrie, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I am Carrie. My website is Subrourbia, Subourbia. I'm on Twitter. I write an awesome article like once a month. And I just like bourbon. I really like bourbon a lot. Been following it for about 2.5 years now. Lately, I don't like bourbon as much just because of the whole industry and everything that's going on, but still try to follow and keep up to date with everything. So thanks for having me.
And Carrie was on before, and also check out, kind of tailing off that, check out the last episode we actually had just him on, and we talked about the 10 annoying, or what was it, the most annoying problems in bourbon right now or something like that. Yeah,
I find that as the years have gone by, both of them, I think I focus a little bit more on the negative part of the hobby, and I think that's why people relate to me a lot, because there is a lot of crap that we deal with in this hobby, and I tend to highlight that, trying to stay a little bit more in the positive realm, but there's just, as I'm tuning in here tonight, there's just stuff that's driving us crazy about this hobby.
The power of positive thinking, Carrie.
I'm trying.
Well, it's that time of the season where we can air our grievances, so we'll get to do that here in a little bit. So, Brian, go over to you next.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Brian Harrow with Sipp'n Corn. At Sipp'n Corn on Twitter was where you'll find me most of the time. Got a blog, too, that focuses on legal history, lawsuits among bourbon, and then also do some reviews. And tonight I'm enjoying my bourbon of the year, which is Rebel Yell, which I never thought I would ever say that in the same sentence. But my Rebel Yell 10 year is my favorite of the year.
You had any good articles lately?
I haven't really. I haven't had a chance to do any of the many articles probably in the last month or so. And before that, I took about a 3-month period off before I had a chance to do any. So I've got about 12 in the hopper, so I'm hoping that Christmas break here lets me get some of those out and get some of the reviews out.
So LexisNexis is starting to update their database with new bourbon trivia.
That's right. Always new cases.
All right, and then Blake.
I'm Blake from Bourbonr.com. We have the Pappy and BTAC release maps that everyone hates, and also
restaurant recommendations.
Yeah, restaurant recommendations. Actually also the home of free samples. And then we have a Facebook group as well. And then you can find them on Instagram or Twitter, Bourbonr on Instagram, and Bourbonr.com on Twitter.
Did you say Bourbonr?
So this is as good of a question as BTAC versus BTAC versus Antique Collection. Is it Bourbonr or Bourbonr?
Bourbonr.
I've always pronounced it Bourbonr, and my reason for having no E was because it looked like Bourbonr.com, and that could be taken all kinds of different ways. Going to your kid's school function. Well, I also write a blog, Bourbonr.com. You can find me at Blake at the Bourbonr.com.
It's like you need a business card with that.
I know. Yeah. I'm not sure what that logo looks like, but it's probably inappropriate. And a long bottle.
I think it looks like something Booker's puts out.
So speaking of Bookers, I guess let's go ahead and jump into that first topic. And I kind of wanted to kind of get at this because it's really the big news of what's happened lately. So Beam has had just a 2016 year review for Beam. They've kind of done a whole lot of stupid shit, in my opinion. So they had the Knob Creek 2001, which was a limited edition with like 30,000 bottles or something ridiculous.
There's now batch 4 and 5 out as well.
Okay, so what are we up to now? 60,000 bottles?
Pretty close to it. Yeah.
Okay, so hardly to call it limited edition, right? And maybe it's not stupid shit, but it's definitely they are pushing the envelope, if you will. Old Granddad 114 is officially EOL, end of life, and everybody's going out and clearing shelves. And now they have just recently announced in the past week and a half that their regular standard Bookers, something that doesn't fly off the shelf. It's something that is a pretty solid bourbon. We talk about it pretty regularly on here. We had it even the last roundtable. We said, what's the good gift to give to somebody in the $50 range? And everybody pretty much said, well, yeah, Bookers. That's a pretty solid bourbon. And they said that they're now upping the MSRP to $99. So I'm going to pose it over to you first, Ryan. So kind of give me your thoughts. What do you think of what Beam has done this past year and maybe the thoughts on Bookers in general?
My thoughts are it must come from Mila Kunis. Her contract just must be draining them dry.
She doesn't come cheap.
Exactly. But I think it's just a beginning of others doing this. The Bookers thing, does it bother me? No, because I only buy Bookers maybe every couple of years. But the thing that concerns me is that others are going to catch on to this or do this, and I think it's just going to be a new trend that all the stuff that used to be common is going to be raised prices and more expensive. I think that's just what's to come.
Carrie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think.
Let me go last.
Got that. All right, Blake, you're up.
He's got something well prepared. Okay. I've gone back and forth on this. So, and I feel like I've read so much about it, I'm probably just plagiarizing someone else at this point. But they see other bourbons, other whiskeys selling for $100, and these NDPs that release like a Blood Oath or whether it's Barrel or whoever it is who are in that $90-$100 range, and it's like, oh, well, we should be there too. And instead of creating a different brand, they thought, hey, why don't we just make Bookers that brand? I think in a year or two, it could still be a good business decision, because how many times have we been asked, what's a good $100 bottle? Because I don't know, 100 has that magic number of, hey, I love you, $100 worth of bourbon. And so I think that's what they're positioning themselves to be. Now, as a Booker's drinker, I think it's a terrible decision, because that's always been my go-to. I posted this earlier this week, but I finally found a Booker's Brown Wax. It's the 82. I got a chance to take part in one of the Booker's Roundtable, so I've been a Booker's fan for a long time, and to see it now be out of that price range of saying, yeah, this is a great recommendation, that's pretty disappointing. I just want this to also be on record, just in case it happens. If they come back in early 2017 and are like, Fred No put his foot down and said, we will not sell Bookers for $100, it's going to be the biggest piece of marketing genius I've ever seen, because people are literally clearing every shelf they can find.
You stole my line.
Did I? I'm glad I went first. That's what you get for trying to back clean up, Carrie.
I know. I still back clean up. It's fine.
So all in all, to say, as a Booker's consumer, I'm pretty disappointed in it. But, from a business standpoint, look, it is what it is. The industry is getting flooded with more and more new drinkers, and most of them won't even realize it used to be a $50 bottle in another year or two. So that's where I am. And the old granddad, I think that was just, that's all going straight into Knob Creek now, I assume. So you now get to pay an extra $10 to $15 for it.
I was thinking it might be a new edition of Basil Hayden, like Basil Hayden Reserve or something that they're going to do, just another label to slap on it. And also
with that mash bill, it must be, right? I mean, they can't put it in Knob Creek because it's the Basil Hayden Old Granddad mash bill for that. And now they're putting Basil Hayden in a tube, for crying out loud.
At 80 proof.
Yeah, it's in a tube.
I didn't see the tube.
I haven't seen the tube.
So maybe so that's a good point. I think they might be coming out with some extra special Basil Hayden or something with that mash bill. I'll let the market either prove 90% of the survey wrong, or like Blake was saying, everyone will forget, and this turns into being $100 bourbon. For my money, if you can find the Elijah Craig barrel proof or a Four Roses private selection that's picked by somebody you like, and you've had good bourbons from them before, you do that. Or if you're in Kentucky, I think you get the Bullet barrel proof, or you get the barrel bourbon if you like that little bit more corny taste. There's a lot of options that are still under $100, and maybe those end up going up too in 2017. But those are now my buys over Booker's.
First of all, so everybody wrote articles about this whole thing, and I couldn't do it because, number one, it's an absolutely brilliant marketing move on Booker's part and Beam's part, because every shelf around me is empty of Booker's. I had my local guy say, "Listen, I got a case of something. It's Booker's Roundtable or Toogie's Invitation." And I was like, I don't give a shit. I don't care.
No, I heard there were some of the greatest palettes on that tasting.
Oh, is that you? You ruined this whole thing. The second thing is, who gives a crap? First of all, everybody needs to understand that they have more power as a consumer than they even realize. Okay, think about Maker's Mark. Does everybody remember what happened with Maker's Mark a couple years ago? When they decided that they were going to change the proof and they were going to lower the proof a little bit so that they could make more juice and make a little bit more money, and there was a shortage. And what happened like 3 months later? They reversed the whole thing. Right.
That's right.
So it's the same thing. Like if you didn't buy Booker's before, you're not going to buy Booker's now when it's $99. And if you are pissed about it, don't buy it. Let it sit on a shelf. Let Beam Incorporated, Suntory, whatever, realize it was a terrible decision. Let them reverse it. And just don't buy it. Like if everybody just doesn't buy it, Beam is going to get the hint and reverse the whole thing. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. They can try, but at the end of the day, there are so many bourbons that are out there that are awesome. They are strong. They are good, and they are under $100. I mean, just look at like the Old Forester the Prohibition 1920. Yeah. I would recommend that all day long for $60. For anybody who wants a really strong, it's not quite barrel proof, it's 115, I think, but what is Booker's usually around that same proof anyway, right? So don't panic, relax, let the market and let you as a consumer dictate what's going to happen to Booker's in the future.
22 Catch 22 said he's still pissed at Makers to this day, by the way.
There's a guy who bought 2 cases of lower proof,
but didn't
Makers when it came out. It was just a little bit that came out, and he's sitting on it so that he can sell low proof Makers and make a bunch of money on it.
Right.
Pretty smart.
So Michael Lurado had the same kind of sentiment as you, thinking that it was probably just decision making and hopefully it's just going to be a fallout. However, he doesn't think that Beam's going to give in the same way that Makers did, because you got to understand, at least back when that happened with Makers, it was still kind of a pretty small family run business at that point. It wasn't owned by whoever they're owned by now.
Beam.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
When they get owned by Beam, I totally forget now.
I don't recall.
Somewhere in the mid to late 2000s.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember when exactly that happened. But anyway, and then I kind of have the same sentiment as Jamie Albright in here. So he said that Beam's manipulating the demand to increase profits. Prior to this, Booker's wasn't exactly flying off the shelf, but in the end of the day, they want more money. You know, I'll play devil's advocate here, right? Like, I don't like the decision, but you can kind of see where they're coming from, right? I would totally think that they want to get more money for what they're putting out there. I think, you know, Fred Minnick and other people in the scene, they were all saying that it was a very undervalued bourbon for what it was in the very beginning, right? And I kind of think so too. You know, Craig Rappert says, I think the juice is running low. I don't think that at all. I think they've got probably more than they can handle. And then if you had the chance, so the guys from Breaking Bourbon couldn't join us tonight, but they had a pretty interesting survey they had put out on their blog. And I'm actually looking at it right now, and it's close to 700 responses, 694 responses. And this data is actually pretty amazing. So, you know, they asked things like, how often did you drink Booker's? The most responded was sometimes, and then the next one was rarely. Are you going to stock up on Booker's before the price increase? 47% said no. 31% said yes. I'll go ahead and put myself into the yes category. I bought one extra bottle because I already had 4 in the basement, but I'd figured I'm saving 50% now than I would next year. So we'll see. And then this is kind of the staggering one, which I thought was pretty impressive. Out of 694 responses, it says, will you buy Booker's when the price goes up to 100%? And the amount of people that said no was 615. So almost an 89% response rate said they will not buy Booker's when it gets to $100. So I guess that kind of goes back to you guys. Like, what do you think is a fair price for Booker's?
$56.99. I say
that around here. That's still, you can get $56.99 all day around here in Kentucky.
I mean, so it's good, right? But the ages have been going down. The price has been going up. It's kind of like bourbon, but
it's a 6-year barrel proof bourbon. It can't be, you know, I'd say $60 to $70. I mean, hell, Elijah Craig, 12 years, $75, you know, to $90. And I think that's a much better option.
I agree.
For the barrel proof?
Yes, yeah.
No, they'll even still sell it at $50 at some places. I think MSRP is $49.99. Yeah, and honestly, like some of the companies who have their products out there, I think they're going to say, you know, oh, here's a couple companies that are raising their prices. Let's go in with our barrel proof 6 to 7 year or 8 year, stay at our price and watch our sales go up as everybody starts buying us, as opposed to the regular Booker's buyers who are now going to abandon ship. I think there's so much competition. How could every company decide that they're going to raise prices like this? They can't. Somebody's going to come in and say, oh, well, you guys are going to price it $100. We're going to price our barrel proof at $70.
I just think we're at a point in the market where these companies are trying to push to see where that threshold is. And because it's so hot right now, they're kind of going to see what is that price point that we can push it to. And then once we get there, all right, we're going to, you know, slowly back it off there and then keep it at that. Because it's just so hot right now and they can pretty much sell anything they want.
That's definitely a good one to bring up. And that's what Craig Ruprecht said that is at the same exact time. He said, let's not even get started on Willet. And he said they lost their damn minds in the gift shop this year. You can't do a year in bourbon review without mentioning that. And I totally agree. You know, talking about pushing the envelope for the longest time, you could get, I would say in the past 2 years, you could go to the gift shop at Willet and it was $10 for every year. So 12 year was $120, $125, add a little tax. That's what it was out the door. Now they started pushing it a little bit. I think they had a 14 year that was there close to 3 weeks to maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, something like that. And I think they were trying to sell it for damn near like $225.
Yeah, it was $230.
$230. Yeah, it was $230 out the door. And it sat there. I mean, it sat there for a while. But however, people are going to buy it because no matter what, it's just what people are going to do. It just didn't fly off the shelves as it usually did. And then now they've kind of backed it down a little bit. And so a 12 year is around $165. So it's about an extra $50 on top of it. Is it undervalued? Maybe. At the end of the day, it's not like these distillers and these people in marketing, they're not idiots. I mean, they see what happens on the secondary market. They see what people are willing to pay. And they think, well, if we can get just a little bit more in our pocket, sure, why not?
I want people to stop saying the word Henry McKenna. Just stop talking about it.
Everybody wants to keep Henry McKenna on the radar.
No, it's terrible whiskey. Just move on to something else.
It's not that bad. I think it's pretty good for a bottle of bond at 10 years.
I was kidding.
He's trying to keep his secret.
I was kidding. I'm trying to keep people away. Henry McKenna is a great deal. Heaven Hills.
The Willet thing's interesting. Yeah, the Willet thing's interesting because they get not nearly as much, or maybe it's just because it's not as massive as a company as like a Beam, but they don't get nearly as much of the backlash from raising prices as some of these other guys do. You know, very rarely do you hear Willet's money hungry. Willet's just adjusting to the market, where everyone else is like, oh, they're a greedy corporation. And that's always an interesting one to me, that Willet, for some reason, always gets this nice pass. You know, it's good stuff. They seem to be the accepted NDP, but it is funny how they just keep pushing the price, and people are like, oh yeah, that's fine.
It still sells out in 2 hours. So
yeah. That's a part of it. Is it still sells out, and
the buyers need to blame themselves. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. No, you're right.
The buyers blame themselves. Brian, who is on the flip side of that? Who are the companies that you think are staying true to their pricing and not trying to rip off consumers?
No one.
Yeah.
Well, everyone's in it to make a profit. None of them are all altruistic and here to give us free bourbon. But let's see, it's probably been 3 years ago, Four Roses private selections locally were in the 45-ish range. And then they moved to 50 and 55, and now you're starting to see them at 65. So they're moving up slightly. So I would have said Four Roses, but they're inching up. But frankly, their private barrels have been worth every penny of that.
Yeah.
You know, the Wild Turkey, you know, they've got their strange pricing similarities between Russell's Reserve and Kentucky Spirit, which cannibalize on themselves. I think one's a lot better than the other, but you know, they're both $45 to $50 bourbons depending where you shop, and they've been kind of that price for a little while. So maybe Wild Turkey, maybe
and
Brown
you have Master's
Foreman.
Keep and Diamond as well, though.
Well, and you still got Diamond on the shelves here. I mean, that was either a mistake on their part or just overpriced or overproduced, one or the other.
You know, if it sits on the shelves in Louisville, Kentucky, that there's something up with it.
Yeah. And I like the Brown Foreman comment. I think that Brown Foreman is the only one so far that I haven't been able to say jacked up the price on something.
Because it sucks.
Say what?
Because it's terrible.
It's not terrible. Old Forester 1920 is great.
I just had the birthday 2016 Sunday, and I was like, this is not.
I love Brown Foreman products, but I got to try the 1920. But even Old Forester birthday bourbon has been, I mean, what was it, 3 years ago, I think? And it would sit 6 deep on a shelf.
Yep.
And I think I paid 80 or 90 this year. Now that's not a huge increase. I would consider that in the reasonable range, but
well, the whole Willets thing, I get why they get and here's why they probably get a pass. You know, they're a small family, owned company, and they only have 8 warehouses up there. And to be honest, I don't mind their prices as much because all their estate bottles, like, I enjoy them. I've never been like, oh, this is crap. Whereas if I go to Heaven Hill or something and get a Parker's this year, or William Heaven Hill, or others that I paid $300 for, and it's just junk. That's what pisses me off. I don't care paying about high prices. I just want the quality.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. I still think.
And Wilt's delivered. You're right.
Heaven Hill did a great job for a while of, even though they took the age statement off the Elijah Craig, I still felt like a lot of their products were in line with what you would expect. And then came Parker's Heritage 24 year, which just went from $99.99 retail to $249.99 at the gift shop. So I love their products. I still think the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof is still probably the best deal out there for barrel proof bourbon. But hell, in 6 months it'll probably be $100.
I mean, with that, do you think it's because the year before that was a malt. Let's call that a bad year. The year before that one was a 13 year, right? And that was a $99 one. So you're adding on an extra, 11 years here. So do you really think it's because of the aging that they made it more, or just because like, hey, we're gonna try to jab and twist the knife as deep as we can and see how much blood we can squeeze out of here?
They got so much stock over there. I don't think it's the age. They got so much shit. They're just probably like trying to get rid of it and let's see what we can sell it for. That's my thoughts.
I think you pay for it now, unless you buy a orphan barrel.
Yeah. I think they were definitely they're the ones who were looking at Bottle Blue Book to see how they should price the new Elijah Craig 21 and then Elijah Craig 18 year when it re-released. So they were doing the exact same thing as everyone else, while they've kind of let these other brands, like, I think on the last roundtable, everyone mentioned Haven Hill Bottled and Bond, the one that's only released in Kentucky, as their favorite bottom shelf. But those upper brands, they've been pushing the limits. I mean, 18 year was a $45 bottle 5 years ago, and now it's $150 bottle. The 21 is $200 bottle. So they push it. Everyone does it, and you can't blame them because it's a business, but as consumer, it still sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay, so before we move on to the next part of this, just to kind of, we don't want to talk about Henry McKenna anymore because we don't talk about Henry McKenna. But we'll talk about Old Forest 1870. So there's a lot of people that kind of chimed in. So Robert Shaw said, Catch 22 said Old Forester 1870 is full of flavor. Another couple years on age, it would be really amazing. Robert Shaw said 1920 crushed Old Forester birthday of this year's releases. And then other people started chiming in about Wild Turkey. Speakeasy said Wild Turkey is staying true as anyone could hope. So I think there's a lot of same sentiments around there. So on the last roundtable, we talked about gifting, right? I mean, it's the holiday time. We're coming into Christmas right now, and we always get the questions of, what should we give somebody? But nobody's really asked us like, oh, what do you want to get? So I'll kind of pose it to you guys. So this money's not an object here, right? Because everybody's sitting here and we're trying to pull as much money and bleed as much money as they can out of us. So money's not an object. If you had the choice of any unicorn out there, what's it going to be? So I'll throw it to you, Blake.
Oh, man. So, I mean, if we're talking money's no object, I might as well shoot for the stars here. I'm talking like a Willick greening from Doug or, something crazy like that. But typically my favorite go-to bourbon gifts have been the 200 milliliters of National Distiller. So like an Old Grandad or Old Taylor, because they're kind of small.
Who's buying you those gifts?
Somebody that just got their trust fund.
But right, bourbon connoisseurs or like average Joe from down the street?
We'll say, I mean, like I said, there's no limits here. So I'm not telling you that like, well, I guess just go give me an Old Forester 1920 because there's nothing else on the shelves, right? I mean, this is somebody that like did the research, they went on the secondary market and bought it for you. Say it was us in this group and we're all pitching to buy you a bottle. What do you want?
Saz 18? Can you get me that?
Saz 18?
Yeah.
Pre-2016, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a Sazerac 18 from 2015 and earlier. But like, people say, "What's your favorite bourbon?" It's one of the toughest questions to answer as a bourbon enthusiast, because anything I say, you're never going to be able to find in a store unless you've been shopping there for a long time or somebody. I mean, it's not just, I can't just rattle off my top 3 favorite bourbons or rye. You're not going to find it anywhere, right? So
that's the point. You're going on the secondary markets and buying it for you.
Yeah, right. They didn't even know how to get to those.
All right. If I wish this was like around the table, I'm going to silence you. Brian, we're going to you.
I'm not even sure where to begin. I agree a lot with Carrie on this. I wouldn't know where to find some of these things because they're not available. But if I could have a 2006 Weller, I'd get that from the antique collection. Something more recent, I really liked the 65-gallon bourbon that Heaven Hill put out as a William Heaven Hill. I think it was the 4th edition. And then it was the same thing that Bourbon Bar got in Atlanta. and some of those bottles have made it out on the secondary because something funky happened with Bourbon Bar. So those are probably more accessible than the Weller. But it was, if anyone can get a hold of those, that's a really good bourbon to find somewhere.
Which that is probably still in one of my favorite bourbons, is that Bourbon Bar pick.
I've had it. It's excellent.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I actually got a free bottle of that. It's a crazy sidebar, but a friend of mine they were putting them on the shelves in a store in Savannah, and he was like, "Oh, that's an interesting bottle. I've never had it. It's only $45." And grabbed like 3 or 4 of them, went back, grabbed like 3 or 4 of them the next week, went back a third week, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that was a mistake. The distributor took all those back."
Well, I know the guy that reclaimed all of those. So.
Yeah. They like did a serious reconnaissance mission to get those things back.
Yeah, they did do too well.
So you've got a line on them then, Kerry?
I did. I passed them up.
Oh,
that was a big mistake.
Yeah,
those are fantastic.
Did my answer on the Christmas gift get through? My connection lost. I just want to make sure everyone knows what to get me for Christmas.
You said Henry McKenna, right?
Yeah. Yep. I said a case of Henry McKenna. You can find it at your local store, preferably one near Cary.
And what about you, Ryan? I guess he wants some more Parker's Blend of Mash Bills or something.
No,
that is such a good bottle.
That used to be my favorite, but after going to DC and to the mecca of bourbon bars, had the original Van Winkle rye in a green bottle. I think it was from like the 70s. I can't remember the year I was drunk, but anyways, it was the old medley, I guess, rye mash bill or whatever, and it was one of the best things I've ever had. So that would be it. Or this bottle called Bond and Lilliard. It's a National Distillers product from 1968.
Oh man, yeah. I guess you got to really enlighten or heighten your experiences when you got to go visit our old cohort Bill down there in DC, huh? So you got to go try a bunch of good stuff.
Yeah, that place. He has 6,000 bottles at his house. And
who is that?
Bill Thomas, that owns Jack Rose's in DC. And then he has like 10,000 more at an undisclosed location. And then there's 2,000 at Jack's at all times. So it's pretty insane, all the stuff that he has. It's crazy.
That's a lot.
He had one of my favorite Bourbon Pursuit podcasts on his, where he gave his phone number out at the end.
Oh, yeah.
And I've actually been texting with him about some bottles that I've been trying to get him in connection with. This lady, she didn't want to sell. And I'm like, well, there's this other guy. He's really famous for this stuff.
Yeah. He said he got like 10 phone calls, and he was like, I want to do it again because I got the most leads ever off your show.
Yeah.
There you go. You know where to sell your old bottles.
I have this old granddad on a swing. I don't know if that's worth the money.
It's nothing. No. Garbage. Just drain pour it.
Open it up. Yeah. Open it up and drink it. Throw away the bottle. Keep the swing.
The swing is cool. Just the bottle just goes like this. It's awesome.
Yeah. Put your elf on the shelf on it. All right. So let's go ahead and we'll move into the
Kenny, we didn't hear your Christmas.
Yeah.
So if it's for me, mine's kind of a I don't know. I guess I'm cheating a little bit because it's kind of a trio, but I want the Rittenhouse lineup, the 21, 23, and 25 year rise. So that's what I would want in the wooden tubes sitting on my shelves.
All right, we know what to get you now.
Yeah.
Guys, we'll have a call after this.
It's a lot of lawns for me.
3,500 later, make it happen. All right, so let's move into the kind of the next part, and really the main kind of piece of the show is kind of just talking about a little bit more about 2016 year in review. So I'll kind of pose the question to you, to Kerry. I'll pose it to you first. So do you think this year was a year of dud bourbons?
I would say yes, it was. I'd say for the most part, this was a pretty dud year of bourbon. Considering my absolute favorite bourbon or rye, bourbon rye, which is so interchangeable these days, is Sazerac 18, the tank stuff. And I just found this year's first distill of Buffalo Trace to be pretty bad, actually. Not even good. Just pretty poor. Seasoned Wood, the big release, and and I guess winter/spring was just okay to me compared to Cured Oak last year, which I thought was amazing. I did like the Parker's Heritage. I thought it was priced a little bit higher than I was expecting. Both of the Diageo releases sucked. The Gifted Horse and the god awful 28-year Hoop and Holler. So yeah, I think, and a lot of people, although I found the 2016 small batch, I actually enjoy it. A lot of people didn't like it. I mean, it was hard to follow up the 2015 limited edition small batch, but that, and I think the Old Forester Birthday Bourbon didn't have great reviews. I think, yeah, in general, besides the Booker's Rye and the Parker's Heritage, I think a lot of bourbons were frowned upon this year.
Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's all of the limited editions, which some of them, a handful, should be earth-shattering. None of them were earth-shattering. And so instead what we had, both have already been mentioned tonight, but the 1920 Old Forester and Rebel Yell, Luxco comes out with something. So it's been a year of duds for the limited editions, I think. But we've had some silver linings in some of the more affordable, attainable brands. So I've enjoyed those. I'm with you, Carrie. I liked the 2016 limited edition small batch. I've had only samples of the antiques, and nothing really was very good there. I didn't have the Old Forester Birthday Bourbon, but you all didn't hear very many good things about it. So I'm looking for something. All of the distillers need to up their game for 2017, and let's see what they can do with it. I mean, we know they have it in them. I mean, Booker's Rye to me was good, but nothing like the 25th anniversary. And with as much bourbon as Beam is sitting on, you know they've got something somewhere that can match that 25th anniversary. And that's what they're probably going to come out with, something truly limited every year instead of this Knob Creek baloney. So they can do it. We know Heaven Hill's got the stock. If Buffalo Trace would just release something, we know they've got some stock. So I got hopes they can do it, but they didn't do it this year.
I will say the one positive thing that wasn't talked about, missing the bourbon side. I thought the Four Roses limited edition small batch was significantly better this year than it was last year.
What?
Yeah, me too.
You don't think so?
I think so.
2015 was legendary. It was so good.
You think? I thought this year's was still a little bit better, but maybe that's just me. All in all, they all beat 2014, so we can agree upon that.
Absolutely.
Right?
2015 was the second best besides the 125th.
Right. So I think they did a pretty decent job, but I totally agree, because you can look it around, you can read the forums, you can see what people see or people say. There's really only two that I think stand out from a lot of people, and that of course is Booker's Rye. I think we can beat that with a dead horse. It was named Whiskey of the Year. All of a sudden, the prices have damn near gone up 30% and overnight. The other one is, a lot of people, maybe it's just because there was so much more of it this year and there's just so many more people into it. But a lot of people said the 2016 William LaRue Weller was really good this year. Yeah. I haven't actually had a chance to try it, just because. Good. But I mean, it's also because a lot of people see it, they think it's the white whale, they want to get it, and this was the year that they had 12,000 bottles of it or whatever, and so there's a lot more noobs that are in the game, and they think it's the best damn thing that they've ever had. So that could be a perception thing. It could be because they don't have a very refined palate, or they don't really know what they're looking for yet. But those are two that constantly or consistently read about. You know, I think every blogger that's on this panel tonight ripped apart BTAC pretty bad. In regards of Saz 18 and Eagle Rare. Now, one thing that I did find interesting was that a lot of people said that the Thomas H. Handy was a lot better than the previous years. So I guess it's still handy at the end of the day, but hey, at least it's better. And then, and Carrie, you kind of talked about it before we started recording this, is what were your thoughts on this year's Van Winkle lineup? What you thought about it in regards to previous years?
I didn't think the 10 was as good as 15. I never think the lot B is good. I think every year I tried Lot B, and I think, I don't even think it's worth retail. I have not had the 15. I have had the rye, which is still the tanked stuff. This is the last year of the tanked since, I think, 2011, which is amazing. The 20 I have not had. I heard the 20 actually was terrible this year. And I've tried the 23, which was, I mean, it's not bad. You're never going to try 23-year wheat whiskey and say, wheated bourbon and say that this is bad. It just was very one-dimensional. Had almost like a bitter aftertaste. A buddy of mine down the street, I called him and asked if he wanted to try 23-year Pappy with me, and he ran up the street. And we both were just pretty unimpressed by it. So I don't think any of them have really been all that impressive. I think we've kind of felt that way for a couple of years now, and kind of know that Buffalo Trace probably is going to have a pretty difficult time matching Stitzel Weller and what they produced for the Van Winkles. But we can all say that I think that name is probably worth more than what's inside the bottle at this point. But I think it was a disappointing year in general. Now, I will say, going back to your William Rue Weller, I think that's actually awesome this year. I think the 16 William Rue Weller is a fantastic bourbon. It's full of flavor, lots of depth, really, really good, but not so much for the Van Winkle line.
Now, we also were talking about a different one that you were drinking before we started this, which was super limited, right? So like only 250 bottles of release, but it was this year's Heaven Hill Select Stock, which was a pre-fire release. So tell everybody a little bit about that.
Really good. I didn't know they only had, how many barrels did they have of that?
Not a whole lot. I think like 4 barrels.
4 barrels. Okay. So they released, I guess it was 20-year. They had a fire in 96, right?
Right.
And burned down most all the rick houses. And I don't know if the distillery itself was burned down, but
it got me out of school that day.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess they had some barrels left over, so they just recently bottled it. I think it was 100. Was it bottled in bond? But it was barrels from pre-fire, and I guess they aged them till 20 years, and it's awesome bourbon. But I mean, at 250 bottles, they're going to be even harder to find from here on out, and the price will just keep going up. But that was a really good release. I actually was a huge fan of Parker's Heritage this year. I like the older style, the heavy oak. On the
basement tasting.
I think it was awesome. It was very polarizing. It was I think half the people hated it, half the people loved it. I was a big fan of it, but yeah, I even forgot what question you asked me.
Well, we're talking about, if we thought 2016 was a year of dud bourbon.
It was duds. 2016 definitely duds for me. The Four Roses Limited Edition was pretty good, but not spectacular. Other than that, I really can't say I liked anything. The best thing I had was actually, I had it last weekend, and it wasn't even a bourbon. It was this Bainbridge Yama American single grain barley whiskey that was aged in like Japanese wood or something. I don't know. I had it at Jack Rose's, and it's by far the best thing I've had this year. It's made out of this company in Seattle, and it's fantastic. It's freaking killer. Play duds.
Oh, all right. So let's go. I'm going to get some of the some comments that are coming in. So 22 Catch 22 says, I thought the Weller 12 sucked this year. Well, I guess it's Weller 12. I don't really know how to respond to that. Michael Lorado said, it was not a dud for me because there's always bottles I want and can't find. I really enjoyed the BTAC Handy, Rebel Yelled, Old Forester 1920, Midwinter's Night, Act 4, and this was the year I discovered 1792 and Pikesville Rye. So I guess there is some of that people are trying to, experiment and kind of go out and find stuff. I also think it's kind of a side effect of what Facebook forums and everything that's happening of everybody getting into bourbon as well, as everybody wants to go and find limited editions, and then they are severely disappointed sometimes. But, at least with us, we've been around it enough that maybe 90% of our bar is nothing but limited editions. So
we didn't talk about 1792.
Oh, go ahead. Talk about it. What do you think?
1792 was they did the full proof this year, and I think that was I think a lot of people like the full proof. I think for $50. It was a nice little bourbon. To me personally, every 1792 tastes the exact same. It's the same way I feel about Jefferson's. Anything Jefferson's finished in
I agree. It tastes the same.
cask tastes like Jefferson's.
I will say I'd like that. Blake had a pretty good assumption on the last, or was it one of the community roundtables, and talking about how 1792 is where Sazerac's heading to see how they can expand the brand and really make it more appealing to more people. And that's why they're trying all these different finishes and releasing these limited edition pieces. But I do like that they are coming out with the full proof. It's not barrel proof, but it's entry proof. In my opinion, I'm not a huge fan of the barrel proof version of the full proof. Or the foolproof version. I do think that the single barrels of 1792 provide a little bit of the ability to kind of discern a lot of tastes between a few of the different single barrels, because when I taste the foolproofs kind of next to each other, I'm like, I can't tell a difference, guys. So
I think it was a good year for like the mid-range bourbons, like the foolproof, the 1792s. They had some good releases. There were a few other ones that they slid into that $40 to $60 category that were pretty good. But all in all, I mean, I don't think anyone was blown away by any release this year, except for, I thought Booker's Rye was really good, but it was $300. So it's hard to get too excited about something that's priced at secondary from the get-go. And then, William LaRue Weller was really good, but how many people are going to get their hands on a bottle of that? So it's just getting harder to, find a mass market with bourbon that is really good.
So the only thing I would say is the longer we put up with the bull crap that we have to deal with, the closer we get to age statements coming back to bourbon because of excess inventory. I mean, what's the stat on the number of barrels aging in Kentucky? Isn't it more than the number of people living in Kentucky right now?
Yeah.
And it's only getting bigger.
But that's just because nobody wants to live in Kentucky.
We're going to catch up. Right. We're going to catch up with that. Eagle Rare 10 years going to put the number back on the front. Elijah Craig's going to put their 12 back on the front. There's so many options for people. We are spoiled because we love our great deals and the age statements and the barrel proofs at great low prices. But the truth is, the distilleries know this. They've been ramping up production for a couple of years. I mean, how much longer do we have to sit through this bullcrap before everything turns back in our favor?
Yeah, no, I honestly think it could be another decade before.
You're a pessimist.
No, I'm an optimist for the distilleries because the market is so huge. I mean, we're sitting here talking about this, but we're that 1% of the market. There's still that other 99% that is just now getting into it, and they're still buying $4,000 of bourbon a month on Jefferson's and Elijah Craig just because it has 12-year on the back label, and they're stocking up Elmer T. Lee by the caseload. There's still a lot of that out there.
Well, and honestly, 99% of the bourbon buyer goes into Total Wine, and they say, "What do you recommend?" And they say, "Let me show you this awesome Wathens bourbon, or this particular private label bourbon made by somebody for them." So I think still the average consumer of bourbon probably still, they know that bourbon is hot, but they still don't know what brand to get when they walk into a store.
Mm-hmm.
So here's an interesting thing that was brought up by one of the people commenting, and I kind of want to get Brian's take on this. And so 22 Catch 22 said, with the pressure on timber, I think they're using wood that has been properly aged and dried. And so do you think that that's why a problem of this year's duds is because of a problem with wood? I mean, honestly, I don't think it is, because they would have had to do that. Nothing's being put out that's
24 years ago.
Right.
That would have been a problem
years ago.
Yeah, that exactly. That would have had been a problem a long time ago. So that I've heard too, that there's going to be some lumber shortages. So that's going to be a problem when this glut that we've got starts coming in at 6 years and 8 years. old for probably, in the next 2 or 3 years, 2 to 4 years. When we start getting that, that's when we might start seeing it. Now, I know that Brown-Forman with their own cooperage has done a really good job of making sure that they've got the right supply, and they're still taking the same steps they do to age it and all those sorts of things. But there's not a lot of people making barrels out there. So I think what we'll probably see is we'll run out of barrels, and you'll be doing, what's the Brown-Forman brand that ages in used barrels? I don't even remember. Can't even think what that Daniels. Is. They might as well. But I think we're gonna start seeing some used barrels come in, and brands trying to tout American whiskey and not being able to use the bourbon name, because I think we are going to run out of wood.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might sound crazy, but I think in like 6 to 8 years, it's kind of going to be like the beer market is now. Like everything special releases from these small breweries. And I think the craft distilleries are going to have to pick up and do these special releases that I know it's going to take a while, but I think that's where you're going to get the value and the difference in the wow factor of these special releases from these craft distilleries in the future. I think the big companies are just going to move towards their, Elijah Craig's, their staple products, because that's their most profitable. And I think the craft distilleries are going to have to pick up for the special releases moving forward. Maybe I'm crazy, but
they'll be really limited by then. So let's hope not.
Just wait there's a craft distillery here in Atlanta that has made their own bourbon, and they're aging it in a warehouse in Atlanta here. And I tried it recently at only 16 months, and it's amazing. They're going to be the next Willet. I'm just saying, they're going to blow it away.
I think that's 100% correct. We're going to start to see these small craft distilleries that are doing cool stuff, and there's enough of them now. There's like 1,100 craft distilleries in the U.S. right now. Someone is doing something cool and interesting, and their experiment is going to turn out really well. And that's where the market's going to eventually go. It's going to go more regional, where Caribbean in Atlanta is going to want to support this distillery instead of buying a $70 bottle from some guy across the country. So I think that is definitely where bourbon and whiskey will go within the next 6 to 8 years, maybe even sooner than that, just depending on who has aging stock. Because eventually we'll stop grading it on that kind of craft curve of, yeah, it's good, but it's still young. It's craft distillery. Eventually it'll just be, and that's when I think all these pricing decisions will be really big mistake for the big brands.
Duke Holbrook says, so the Booker's wooden box is the real culprit here.
That's my uncle. Watch out.
All right, so we're getting pretty close to the end here. I know Blake and Carrie have got to run off to bed here soon. So
I just want to throw a commercial out there. So this is Booker's. This is Tuki's Invitation. This is priced right now at $56.99. I would run out tomorrow and buy all of these up, because I don't know if you know this or not, but they're going up to $99. And this wood, this is fresh wood on this box right here. Okay,
and it was hand selected and handcrafted by one of the best tasting panels in Booker's Roundtable history. So
is your name on the bottle? Because it's on like 18 other bottles, but did you put your name on this one? You should have.
My nickname in high school was Toogie, so yeah.
I saw Bourbonr on here. That's why.
It says Bourboner's big.
Just be smart as consumers. Stick with this hobby and just don't.
If you look at the bottom of the bottle,
and right there. Don't buy stupid shit.
Don't buy Blake's internet.
All right, so let's kind of wrap this up. So I kind of want to leave everybody with one last thought. I want you to say what's one thing that you were happy about and one thing that pissed you off in 2016 in regards to bourbon. It's really easy for us to sit here and point out all the negatives because we kind of live and breathe and die by this stuff. But kind of pick out a good moment and then talk about one thing that just kind of really irks you and gets at you about this year.
All right, I'll jump in on something good, and it's not a brand in particular, but I think bourbon enthusiasts are using their power for good, and we've had a lot of bourbon groups raising money this year. I was at a Jim Rutledge event that raised something like $28,000 for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, which is near and dear to Jim's heart, a cause he supports. And no one was really celebrating his 50th since he had left. So put a bit on a big party for him and raised a bunch of money. And there's other groups that have been raising money through charity tastings where they get the rarest of all rare bottles in, and you get a 1 ounce pour, and you pay a bunch of money, and it all goes to a good cause. And so as more people get into this hobby, I'm hoping that really takes off, because we can really support a lot of good causes. And you got to name something that pissed you off too. Something that pissed me off, and maybe this is the Bourbonr logo that Blake is looking for, but stop with the crotch shots, guys. I don't need to see any crotch shots in 2017. Let it die. Let it die.
Yeah.
Do it.
I would agree with that. It's a good call.
One thing I guess making me happy is seeing my hometown just change and grow so much from this industry. Bardstown is just, it's so crazy how much there's warehouses popping up, jobs being created, new restaurants, new bars, hotels coming in. It's really exciting to see the change. We talk shit about these big companies, but they are really making an impact in the local area there. But the thing that pissed me off is these freaking fucking liquor barn emails that they send out and that let everybody know that stuff's coming out. And it's like, people are just going to show up because you're sending an email about it. I don't know. I wish it would just go back. We put it on the shelves. Don't tell anybody about it. Who shows up gets it, versus doing these big ordeals of raffles and, send an email blast where you have to get there early for freaking Weller 12. It's just pissing me off, and it's got to stop.
I can second that one. I totally partly agree.
Agreed.
All right, Blake, what do you think?
So one thing I like about bourbon is there is a whole lot of new guys coming in constantly. And, I kind of see it a lot with Bourbonr, people getting into the hobby and having an appreciation for everything. So that's always fun. And kind of on the point that Brian said is there's a lot of people doing, Bourbonr for as much junk as we put on. We've raised close to $5,000 for a nonprofit in regards to it's a cancer fund. So just things that we can do with these bourbon bottles is always pretty cool to see. Now, one thing I would hate is just the amount of attention that's focused on limited editions. So I'm probably just as guilty as this as anybody, but a guy who's new to bourbon doesn't need to go out and pick up Four Roses single barrel limited edition, some bottle with Van Winkle on it and some Stag or something. There's so many other great bottles that they could be getting into, but the focus is on these limited editions. And I think that's just, it's misguided because one, you don't even know your own taste palette yet. And two, you're just spending a whole lot more money than you need to before you're really getting into the hobby. So
the thing that I love about bourbon and rye and why I still love this hobby are the memories that get created through bourbon and rye. We'll have guys over that have never even seen, they've heard of Pappy Van Winkle. They've never tried it. I'll pour them a Pappy. We'll have a great evening of talking about bourbon, pouring great bourbons, and they'll say, man, I remember that time I came over. It was so much fun. I had a great time trying all this stuff. I mean, those are the memories that are why we are in this hobby, right? We're in this hobby not only because it's enjoyable and it's fun, but you make some great connections with people and you have some great memories with it. And in this year, 2016, I had a lot of great connections with people. And that's why I'll keep staying in this hobby, even as everything else about it pisses me off. People taking off age statements, raising prices, dumbasses taking over the hobby, just the way it is. But the memories definitely overshadow all of that bad stuff.
So is there like a single one thing that pissed you off, or is it just everything in general?
Just everybody, even all of you fucking guys here, except Brian. You've never pissed me off, Brian. And Brian, you haven't either.
So I'll kind of wrap this up and thinking about this. I'll kind of start. Everybody kind of start off talking about what they were happy about, and I'll kind of start off by kind of what pissed me off. And I think it's kind of going, tag along with what Carrie was saying is just the Facebook explosion of what we've been seeing. It's the groups we're not supposed to talk about, but some of the groups are reaching astronomical numbers. And with that become, as Carrie said, more and more people that are just getting in the hobby, and all they want to do is find limited releases. It kind of goes back to what Blake was saying. And then it makes it harder for us who are, picking up 8 George T. Staggs back in 2014. That was easy. This year, getting one was an incredible feat that was pretty damn tough to do. So getting anything limited edition now is pretty much pissing me off because of the amount of competition that has come up around here. But all this has an inverse effect. The inverse effect is that everybody sitting here tonight has gotten just a little bit more popular in the past year because of it. The podcast has really taken off. We've got a great listener base. There's been 40 people that were actually watching this podcast happen live tonight. I'm sure all the bloggers here on this roundtable can say that their following has increased. So I'm glad to see that. There is a lot more interest in it, and I think that's what's great. Maybe it's bad on us because all we ever talk about is limited releases, right? I think we should maybe get back to talking about maybe just Henry McKenna or something like that. With that, I think that like I said, it's gotten so popular that it's had a good inverse effect on what we've been able to contribute back into the greater bourbon community.
Well said.
We did this as a hobby, right? Because we love it. It's a hobby, but the people that we meet and the people that we impact and the relationships that we make, those are real. And so it's awesome to see a hobby translated into something where you can affect people on a real side, which is cool.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and let's wrap it up. So go around the table real quick. Carrie, you go first. Who you are, where they can find you, how they can get in contact with you.
Carrie, on Twitter, follow @bourbon_gamer. On Facebook, look for the Subrourbia, SUBOURBIA. That is my blog, Subrourbia.com. I'm also in the Bourbon Penthouse calendar. I'm January. So look for that, and we'll see you guys soon.
Brian.
I'll jump in. Brian with Sipp'n Corn. Find me on Twitter @SIPPNCORN, or search the Google blog spots for Sipp'n Corn. And thanks for our 40 guys for watching, and all you too.
He's February, by the way. That was a great layout.
It was a really cold month.
Then you had your sweater on. Just the sweater.
That's quote of the night.
All right, Blake, finish this up.
Blake, therealbourbonr.com. No, BlakeBourbonr.com. On Twitter, it's Bourbonr.com. And then Instagram, it's Bourbonr. There's a Facebook group as well. Or if you have any questions, feel free to email me at blake@bourbonr.com.
Awesome. Want to say thank you all again for joining the show. Make sure you follow us as well. For anybody that's out there listening to this, it's @Bourbon Pursuit on Twitter and Instagram. And we also have Facebook.com/Bourbon Pursuit. If you do like what you hear, make sure you support the show on Patreon. So thank you to everybody that is supporting the show. We actually will have t-shirts here relatively soon. So it's patreon.com, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit.
Hey, Kenny and Ryan.
Yep.
How many podcasts are you up to now?
This will be 78, I believe, this week is this release.
Wow.
You guys are, I'd say from all of us in the bourbon community, thank you for all that you do for your podcast. I know it's a lot of work to do it as often as you do it and interview all the people that you do, but I think we all look forward to all of your podcasts and all of your hard work. So thank you guys for all that you do too.
You can thank Kenny.
Absolutely, guys.
Most of it. I just show up and make random comments.
Well, cheers, guys. You help give us the content, so it makes it really easy.
Yeah. Cheers, fellas. I'm going to bed.
It gives me plenty to listen to on a long commute to work. So I do thank you.
All right, Ryan, wrap it up for us.
Yeah, thanks guys for taking your time. I know you are ready to go to bed. Get your day ready tomorrow to fix some computers and prepare some taxes. So have a good night. And thanks guys for listening. Have a happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast of Bourbon Pursuit is in partnership with thewhiskeywash.com, a lifestyle website for news and reviews for people who like whiskey, and for those who think a life without whiskey has no style, thewhiskeywash.com.